the last person to see Daniel Harper alive, didn't realize that moment would matter. It was a cold Thursday night in early November. The kind of night when the streets emptied faster than usual, and most people preferred the quiet comfort of their homes. The town of Silver Creek had already begun preparing for winter. Storefronts closed early, sidewalks remained nearly silent after 9, and a thin layer of fog often settled between the streetlights, softening every outline. Daniel left his office at exactly 9:18 p.m. Security cameras captured him walking through the parking lot with his usual calm pace, one hand tucked into the pocket of his coat, the other holding his phone. Nothing about his posture suggested urgency. Nothing hinted at fear. If anything, he looked like someone finishing another predictable day. Daniel was not the type of person who attracted attention. At 34, he worked as a financial analyst for a regional logistics company, a stable job that demanded precision but offered little drama. His colleagues described him as reliable, organized, and almost excessively punctual. He paid bills early, returned calls quickly, and never missed scheduled meetings. Predictability was, in many ways, his defining trait, which is precisely why his disappearance felt so deeply unsettling. At 9:42 p.m., Daniel's car entered his neighborhood. A residential camera positioned above a garage recorded the vehicle slowing near the curb before pulling into his driveway. The headlights switched off. The engine stopped. But Daniel never walked through his front door. The following morning, when he failed to appear for an important quarterly presentation, his absence generated mild confusion rather than immediate alarm. Co-workers assumed he had fallen ill or perhaps encountered car trouble. Daniel wasn't known for spontaneous decisions, but everyone is allowed an unexpected morning. By noon, however, concern began to grow. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. His calendar showed no cancellations. Around 2 p.m., his manager contacted Daniel's younger sister, Claire, who lived 2 towns away. At first, she wasn't worried. Daniel had always valued solitude. It wouldn't be impossible for him to disconnect for a few hours. Still, something about the silence felt unusual enough that she decided to drive to his house. She arrived shortly after 4 p.m. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. The curtains were partially drawn. No lights were on. His car sat in the driveway, exactly as the camera had shown the night before. Fallen leaves had gathered near the tires, untouched. Claire knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time, pressing her ear lightly against the wood as if the house itself might respond. Still nothing. Using the spare key Daniel had once insisted she keep only for emergencies, Claire stepped inside. The air carried that faint, neutral stillness typical of closed houses. Not unpleasant, just unmoving. Her first instinct was that Daniel might still be asleep, though the idea felt increasingly unlikely. Then she noticed the kitchen. On the counter sat a paper grocery bag, neatly packed but not fully emptied. Inside were items that required refrigeration: milk, fresh vegetables, a package of chicken. The receipt timestamp read 9:27 p.m. He had stopped at the supermarket on his way home. The milk was no longer cold. Nearby, Daniel's wallet rested beside his keys. He never went anywhere without them. His watch lay carefully aligned next to the sink, as if removed out of habit. Yet the phone was missing. Claire moved deeper into the house, each step amplifying the quiet. The living room lamp remained on. A book rested open on the arm of the sofa, positioned face down to preserve the page. A small gesture that suggested interruption rather than completion. Upstairs, the bedroom looked untouched. The bed was perfectly made. No suitcase was missing. No drawers were open. Nothing suggested preparation for travel. By the time Claire returned to the kitchen, unease had hardened into something more defined. She called the police at 4:38 p.m. Officers arrived within 20 minutes. At first glance, the situation didn't align with the patterns typically associated with disappearances. There were no signs of forced entry, no visible struggle, no overturned furniture. The house told a story of routine abruptly paused, not chaos. One detail, however, immediately drew attention. The back door was slightly open, not wide enough to notice from across the room, but enough for the cool air outside to slip through the narrow gap. Detectives later determined the lock was functional. There are no scratch marks, no structural damage. If someone had entered, they had either been invited or the door had never been locked. The yard beyond showed little. November ground is notoriously uncooperative when it comes to footprints. Too firm to capture clear impressions, yet soft enough to distort them beyond usefulness. Neighbors were interviewed that same evening. Most reported nothing unusual. No shouting, no suspicious vehicles, no late-night disturbances. Silver Creek was a type of place where abnormal sounds traveled easily, and yet the night before it passed with almost unnatural calm. Then investigators found the camera, mounted above the Harper garage, angled slightly toward the driveway. It provided a limited but valuable perspective. The footage confirmed Daniel's arrival at 9:42 p.m. It also revealed something else. At 10:11 p.m., a shadow crossed the far edge of the frame. Not clearly human, not clearly anything at all, just a brief distortion of darkness, moving where darkness already lived. Enhancement would later prove inconclusive. By the second day, the case had shifted from welfare check to active investigation. Detective Laura Bennett was assigned as lead. With 12 years on the force, she had learned that the most perplexing cases were rarely the loudest. Violence often announces itself. Silence, on the other hand, requires interpretation. She began with what she considered the anchor question of every disappearance. Who saw him last? Daniel's workday provided the first answers. He had attended meetings, exchanged routine emails, even joked with a co-worker about an upcoming snowfall. Nothing in his behavior suggested distress. But at 8:53 p.m., he received a phone call. The conversation lasted 4 minutes, long enough to matter. The number belonged to Ethan Cole. When detectives reached Ethan, he seemed surprised but cooperative, a longtime friend of Daniel's. He explained that the call had been casual, a quick conversation about a hiking trip they had discussed but never scheduled. Ethan stated that Daniel sounded normal, relaxed, even no tension, no coded language, no farewell disguised as small talk. Still, investigators noted something subtle. Ethan paused often, as if carefully selecting each word, not necessarily deception. Some people simply grow cautious around police, but enough to place his name quietly onto a list that was just beginning to form. Because in cases like these, lists always form. And soon, there were 3 names on it. Ethan Cole, the friend, Maya Lynn, the colleague who had been the last person to see Daniel leave the office, and Victor Hale, the neighbor who, according to property records, had filed 2 formal noise complaints against Daniel in the past 6 months. An odd detail, considering Daniel was not known for hosting gatherings. 3 individuals connected by circumstance. 3 ordinary lives now intersecting at a single unexplained absence. By the 3rd day, search teams expanded beyond the neighborhood. Dogs traced Daniel sent to the edge of his backyard, where it seemed to dissolve near the tree line. No trail extended into woods. It was as if he had stepped outside and then simply ceased to occupy space. Statistically, adults rarely vanish without trace unless one of 3 factors is present: intention, accident, or intervention by another person. Detectives approached each possibility methodically. Voluntary disappearance seemed unlikely. Daniel had made no large withdrawals, purchased no tickets, packed no belongings. His financial activity remained frozen in routine patterns. An accident was conceivable but unsupported. Hospitals reported no unidentified patients. Nearby roads showed no evidence of late-night collisions, which left the 3rd possibility, the one investigators never rushed to name, but never ignore. Meanwhile, technicians finally accessed Daniel's phone records. The device itself had not been recovered, yet the carrier data revealed something intriguing. At 10:17 p.m., approximately 6 minutes after the shadow appeared on camera, Daniel's phone sent a single outgoing message. The content was deleted, but the recipient was not. Victor Hale. When questioned, Victor admitted receiving the message, but claimed he hadn't noticed it until the following morning. According to him, the text contained only 2 words. "Can we talk?" Victor said he assumed it referred to their ongoing tension about property boundaries. Recently, Daniel had installed brighter exterior lights. which Victor argued spilled into his bedroom window. A trivial conflict. The kind neighbors forget within weeks. Yet now it glowed with retrospective importance. Detective Bennett understood something many overlook. Mysteries rarely begin with dramatic motives. More often, they grow from small frictions, inconveniences, misunderstandings, wounded pride. She requested Victor's phone. He handed it over without resistance. Forensics confirmed the message. Timestamp accurate. No reply sent. At least none preserved. And still, something about the timeline refused to settle neatly. Daniel arrives home. Groceries unpacked halfway. Back door jar. Message sent to a neighbor he supposedly disliked. Then nothing. No movement on cameras. No financial activity. No digital trace strong enough to follow. By the end of the first week, media attention began to gather. Silver Creek was in use of headlines, and the absence of answers created a vacuum reporters were eager to fill. Speculation emerged cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Was Daniel harboring secrets? Had someone been watching him? Was the shadow merely a trick of light, or the only witness? Detective Bennett remained resistant to narratives that formed too quickly. Experience had taught her that the truth often hides behind the detail everyone initially dismisses. So she returned to the house, not searching for what was obvious, but for what felt slightly misplaced. She stood again in the kitchen, studying the grocery receipt. 9:27 p.m. 7 items, but the bag contained 8. One of them, a bottle of red wine, did not appear on the receipt, which meant Daniel had picked it up after paying, or someone else had. And suddenly, the question shifted. Perhaps the night had not been as ordinary as it seemed. Perhaps Daniel hadn't planned to spend it alone. And if that was true, then somewhere between the supermarket and the open back door existed a moment no camera had captured, a moment where expectation turned into something else entirely, something final. Detective Bennett had learned long ago that contradictions rarely announce themselves loudly. More often, they appear disguised as minor inconsistencies, a detail slightly out of place, a timeline that bends instead of aligning, a memory that improves with repetition rather than fading. The bottle of wine was the first fracture in what had otherwise seemed like a carefully ordinary evening. When investigators returned to the supermarket footage, they saw Daniel selecting groceries with mechanical calm, moving through the aisles with the efficiency of someone following a mental list. Milk, vegetables, pasta, coffee filters. Nothing indulgent, nothing spontaneous. Then, just before heading to the register, he paused. He stood still for nearly 8 seconds in front of a display near the back wall, long enough for hesitation, too long for coincidence. A woman approached. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she positioned herself beside the cart, as if their proximity were already understood. Camera angles never captured her face clearly, but her posture suggested familiarity rather than chance. Daniel reached for the bottle of wine. He did not place it on the conveyor belt. Instead, the woman took it from his hand. Witnesses later recalled nothing unusual about the interaction. Two adults sharing quiet conversation inside a grocery store is among the least memorable events imaginable. Yet when detectives adjusted the footage frame by frame, one subtle gesture emerged. As they walked toward the exit, Daniel touched the back of his neck, a self-soothing motion often associated with stress. Maya Lynn denied meeting Daniel that night. When confronted with the footage, she didn't immediately collapse into confession. Instead, she inhaled slowly, her expression shifting not toward panic, but toward resignation. The look of someone realizing that omission had finally lost its protective value. She admitted they had been seeing each other. Not publicly, not officially. Maya explained that Daniel preferred privacy, especially at work, where relationships often became currency for gossip. What began as occasional lunches had evolved into something quieter, more complicated. She insisted there had been no conflict between them, no argument, nothing that would explain violence. That night, she said, Daniel invited her over for dinner. The wine had been her suggestion. They arrived at his house shortly before 10. For a time, her account matched the physical evidence. 2 glasses were found drying beside the sink. A cutting board showed faint knife marks consistent with recent use. Olive oil sat uncapped, as if forgotten mid-preparation. According to Maya, everything felt normal until Daniel checked his phone. She described a change almost too subtle to measure. Not fear exactly, but distraction. His responses shortened. His attention drifted toward the dark window above the sink. When she asked what was wrong, he hesitated before answering. "It's probably nothing," he reportedly said. Minutes later, he typed a message to Victor. "Can we talk?" Maya claimed she offered to leave, sensing he needed space. Daniel walked her to the back door rather than the front, explaining it was closer to where she had parked along the side street. She remembered the cold most vividly, the sharp kind that forces breath into visible clouds. As she stepped outside, she asked if he was sure everything was okay. He nodded. Then he added something she hadn't initially told investigators, not because she believed it irrelevant, but because repeating it made the night feel heavier. "If he comes over," Daniel said quietly, "I just want to clear this up." He, Victor Hale, the tension between neighbors, it seemed, had grown roots deeper than complaints about lighting. Phone records revealed 3 prior calls between Daniel and Victor that month alone, each lasting less than 2 minutes. No hostility captured in audio. Only the sterile politeness people adopt when disagreement hasn't yet found a proper shape. Victor, when brought back for questioning, appeared less composed than before. Detectives noticed perspiration gathering near his collar, despite the controlled temperature of the interview room. At first, he repeated the same narrative. He saw the message in the morning, assumed it could wait, went about his routine. But Bennett placed a photograph on the table. It showed Victor's backyard taken at dawn. Specifically, the narrow strip of soil beneath his deck. Overnight rain had softened the earth just enough to preserve impressions invisible the day before. 2 overlapping sets of footprints. One matched Victor's shoes, the other aligned in size and tread, with a pair found inside Daniel's closet. Victor stared at the image longer than necessary. Silence expanded. Then, finally, it fractured. He admitted walking over. "Just to talk," he insisted. He said he arrived around 10:25 p.m. Daniel opened the back door almost immediately, as if expecting him. The conversation began stiffly but not aggressively. Neighbors negotiating irritation. The light, the complaints, sleep disrupted, property lines. But conversations carry histories beneath their words, and Victor confessed that irritation had been accumulating for months. What began as practical concerns had gradually transformed into something more personal, though he struggled to articulate exactly when that shift occurred. Then Daniel said something Victor hadn't anticipated. "I know you've been watching the house." Victor claimed the accusation felt absurd, yet detectives would later confirm that a small security camera had indeed been mounted beneath Victor's roofline, angled not toward his own yard, but toward Daniel's kitchen window. Victor defended it as precaution. Daniel saw it as intrusion. Voices rose. "Not shouting," Victor insisted, "just louder than before." Daniel stepped outside, perhaps to prevent Maya from overhearing what remained of the exchange, unaware she had already driven away. Cold air sharpened every word. Victor described a moment that followed as a blur shaped by anger rather than intention. Daniel moved closer, gesturing toward the camera, demanding it be removed. Victor placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Whether to steady or restrain, he could no longer say. Daniel pulled back, lost his footing on damp leaves, fell. The human body is both resilient and fragile in ways that defy intuition. A fall from standing height is usually survivable. Usually. But Daniel's had struck the stone border lining the garden. The sound, Victor recalled, was disturbingly small. Afterward came stillness. Victor said he knew immediately something was terribly wrong. He checked for breathing. Felt none. Panic, once ignited, has a logic of its own, one that prioritizes escape over clarity. He told himself it had been an accident. He told himself no one would believe that. So he chose the path fear often builds. Concealment, undercover darkness. He carried Daniel through the tree line separating their properties, loaded the body into his truck, and drove toward an old service road rarely used outside logging season. There, beyond the reach of casual hikers, he left what he could no longer face. Search teams would later recover Daniel exactly where Victor described. The medical examiner confirmed the injury was consistent with a backward fall onto stone. No defensive wounds. No evidence of prolonged struggle. Legally, the distinction between accident and crime would become a matter for courts. Morally, the line had already been crossed the moment silence replaced truth. When asked why he hadn't called for help, why he hadn't dialed emergency services even with uncertainty, Victor struggled to answer incomplete sentences. "I thought my life was over," he said eventually. Detective Bennett responded with the calm clarity that had defined her career. "Instead," she replied, "you ended us twice." News of the resolution spread quickly through Silver Creek, though relief proved more complicated than expected. Closure rarely restores what absence removes. It simply reshapes the questions people carry. Neighbors began locking doors that stood open for decades. Casual disagreements suddenly felt less trivial, and many found themselves replaying an uncomfortable truth. The night had not been marked by monstrous intent, but by ordinary anger allowed to expand unchecked. Daniel Harper's story did not become famous beyond regional headlines. No documentaries followed. No books dissected every detail. Yet within the town, his absence recalibrated something invisible, the assumption that normalcy guarantees safety. Because the most unsettling lesson was also the simplest. Extraordinary tragedies rarely begin as extraordinary moments. They begin with small grievances, unspoken suspicions, pride that refuses to step backward, and the dangerous belief that there will always be time to repair what anger damages. On a street once defined by quiet predictability, porch lights now remain on a little longer each night, not out of fear alone, but out of awareness. The fragile understanding that lives can pivot irrevocably within seconds. Some residents would later say the shadow captured on that distant camera no longer felt mysterious once its owner had a name. But Detective Bennett disagreed. "The shadow was never the mystery," she told a reporter months later. "The mystery is how quickly ordinary people can step into it.